How do 4 people get murdered with some sort of knife or edged instrument? To me, 4 people, does that mean we're looking for more than one suspect? And what would this crime scene indicate that it was isolated and targeted?
But you know, the Moscow police, small police department, they haven't seen a murder since 2015. They're not really equipped for this. So they've asked and reached out for help from not only the state, but the federal partners. The FBI, the profiling team are down there.
The Latah County coroner says the 4 students were likely asleep. Some had defensive wounds and each victim was stabbed multiple times. Authorities found no sign of sexual assault. Moscow police say at this point in the investigation, they do not believe the 2 surviving roommates or the man seen standing near a local food truck were involved in the murders.
Investigators are still trying to piece together where the 4 University of Idaho students went the night before they were found in their Moscow home, stabbed to death. Investigators are hoping the map released today will provide additional tips from the community.
The map details the night of Saturday, November 12th into the early hours of Sunday, November 13th. It highlights locations and approximate times when Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogan were in downtown Moscow, while Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle were at the Sigma Chi house.
We have learned, and what we didn't learn.
Earlier today, they executed a warrant on the suspect's apartment in Washington, seized the car in Pennsylvania. All the connections are going to be made. Here we go, folks.
Tonight, in conjunction with the Pennsylvania State Police, Federal Bureau of Investigation, detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, on a warrant for murders of Ethan, Xana, Madison, and Kaylee.
We saw last night Bryan Kohberger transported by Pennsylvania State Police plane with the U.S. Marshals.
And there were a couple of Washington State University officers noticed that there was a white Hyundai Elantra. It was a different, year, because people think, oh, well, they were looking at him that early, but that's really not the case.
The bolo that we got was, I think, identical to the one that eventually went out to the public, but this was on November 28th. They sent a bolo out to the local law enforcement agencies with a vehicle of interest. One of our officers, within 16 hours of receiving that bolo, was checking our parking database. It includes information about vehicles that have parking permits or that pay to park on campus, and found a white Hyundai Elantra that was with Pennsylvania plates registered to Bryan Kohberger, but it was a 2015. So the bolo was very specific about the vehicle make, the vehicle model, and the vehicle year parameters and the color. So he didn't submit that as a tip. And then later, that was on graveyard shift. And then later on day shift, one of our officers was driving around and saw that same vehicle parked in graduate student housing. And again, it was not within the date parameters.
So those 2 officers didn't end up sending that information over to Moscow PD because of the date discrepancy or the model year discrepancy?
That's correct.
Coming out of hearings, there would be people who would call you and say, I don't like what's happening in that courtroom.
It's just weird porn fetishes, but 2 of the fetishes were in that room. Drunk, passed out girls and gagging girls. And those are 2 things that were part of that crime scene. For Thompson to say that there was no sexual assault, of course there wasn't. He didn't have enough time. Somebody came up there. But why are you defending somebody who just killed 4 people? Why are you not even making him stand in the courtroom and admit that he killed 4 people? I mean, it's upside down world sometimes when you go in those court systems and they're literally, oh, you've been so respectful. You can sit down when you plead guilty, with a yes and no. We're just glad to be done with it. We're glad to move on.
When you said drunk, passed out girls, gagging girls, was there something that happened at the crime scene involving gagging that you heard?
Yeah. That's what we've heard. That's why we want to get all these facts straight. So we don't want to have a statement that isn't accurate. Parents shouldn't have to beg to know what happened to their kid the last 24 hours of their life. We figured out everything that we could. We were the ones that tell them to go to these cameras and pull them off.
Did someone with the investigation describe that Kaylee or Maddie was gagged during this horrible crime?
I was told that by Babbitt. That was Babbitt.
And I just, for our viewers right now, Kathy Babbitt.
There was some damage around her mouth right here, like somebody had pressed in and try to keep her quiet.
Partial autopsy reports for the 4 friends released on Thursday. The county coroner indicating the time of death was sometime after 2 a.m.
It's pretty traumatic when there's 4 dead college students who have been stabbed to death in one location.
The autopsies also showing all 4 victims were killed by what was described as a bigger knife. They had extensive injuries from multiple stab wounds, and that the wounds varied, including different places people were stabbed and the amount of times.
You know, the knives are either single-edged or double-edged. There are different shapes. There are some that curve to a point. There are others that are rounded at the edge. There are some that have a hilt that can leave a mark when it strikes the skin. You can tell the length of a knife, the width, how many edges is, what would they used to call that knife? The 007, I think. It was
the gravity knife, yeah.
Yeah. There's triangle-shaped blades that have 3 sharp edges. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of knives.
So how do you tell from the exam what kind of knife? Is there a science to that, Barbara?
Sure. The skin has little muscles in it. It has a certain tensile strength that holds it together. When you cut through the skin, there's a separation, and now the flesh is now open. So in order to detect the shape of the knife, you reapproximate the edges of the wound. You bring them back together, and that gives you the width of the knife. That tells you where the sharp edge was. You measure the depth of the puncture. Now, don't forget, depending on how much force, you can, say in soft tissues like the abdomen, you could push in further than the depth and the actual length of the knife. But the pathologist very carefully measures all of these things and compares them and comes up with an approximation of what kind of knife they believe it could be.
Let's talk about his Amazon purchases. K-bar knife. The searches were from quite a few months, I think 6 or 8 months, 3/20/22 to 3/30/22. And he not only looked at and purchased the K-bar knife, but he also purchased a sharpener. Ed.
Yeah, a sharpening stone, yes. And they have a witness that can validate the purchase.
Whoa. What do you got going on there, Ed?
Well, this is mine, and here's the K-bar knife. So this is what potentially our witness saw, minus the glasses. And if he was wearing a hoodie sweatsuit, black sweatpants and sweatsuit, I believe. So this is just a hoodie.
Look, Ed does not have bushy eyebrows, but you can clearly see from this is the exact replica of this balaclava.
And this is the K-bar knife.
Eyewitness Dylan Mortensen says she saw a man in a similar mask in the house the night of the murders.
The defense is bringing up the detectives from Latah County, Moscow PD. When they were interviewing DM and BF, in particular DM, they're saying that she was kind of coaxed into this drawing that we're looking at here. I don't think Judge Hippler is going to say, we're going to throw this out. The only surviving witness that drew a statement and submitted it, into the court record.
And Taylor's motion was denied by Judge Hippler.
Judge for the Idaho College murders case is laying the groundwork with these critical decisions ahead of the murder trial this summer. Regarding Kohberger's autism spectrum disorder, DNA evidence, witness testimony, and suspect's car.
The defense argued Kohberger should not be eligible for execution due to his neurological disorders, including autism spectrum disorder.
Hippler severely restricting what Kohberger's defense team can say about his autism spectrum disorder unless Kohberger takes a stand on his own behalf. The judge clearing the way for an Idaho State Police lab manager to testify on specifics of Kohberger's DNA, which prosecutors say was found at the crime scene on a knife sheath similar to this. And the judge will allow a state expert to testify that this white Hyundai Elantra spotted on security cameras at and around the crime scene is the same make and model that Kohberger drove.
Bryan Kohberger has accepted a plea deal. ABC News has confirmed that information through a letter that was sent to the families of all 4 of those victims. That letter says that Bryan Kohberger will plead guilty to all of the charges against him. He was facing potentially the death penalty. This guilty plea, he will accept 4 consecutive life sentences. He will agree to serve the rest of his life in prison, taking the death penalty off the table.
I'm very aggravated. I don't think this was handled properly by the prosecution. I believe that they should have consulted in person with each of the families of the victims and discussed what was going on and why they were coming to this decision to offer this deal. In addition, I feel that they were able to make this negotiation with the defense team, and I don't understand why they didn't negotiate the fact that Bryan should get up there and explain exactly what he did. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. For that alone, he should have been forced to say exactly what he did, confess to what he did.
There's 4 separate families here that have 2 sides to it. They have a mom and a dad and, aunts, uncles, and everybody in between.
You're not going to get full consensus on any issue. So, well, I always knew this was a possibility, that this plea was always going to be on the table at some point in time. It probably has been out there for quite some time. It's just as we got closer to picking a jury and the defense finally came around and said, "Oh, we'll take that plea so that Bryan doesn't face the death penalty." And I can understand wholeheartedly why many of the victims' families are upset.
Yeah, this murder happened on November 13th of 2022, and that's what I think about. I think about the families and the emotional roller coaster that they're going through right now as we speak.
Well, it is now. All but the sentencing is left, and he will be doing his life in prison without the possibility of parole and no appeals, saving the state of Idaho and the family all the grief and suffering and pain associated with appeals and so forth and so on. Yeah. So the next time we see him, he's going to be in prison garb, according to the judge.
Yeah, and he said it. The judge said it. This is about our victims. Xana Kernodle, 20 years old at the time. Ethan Chapman, 20 at the time. Madison Mogen, 21 at the time. And Kaylee Gonzalez, 21 at the time. Our strength, prayers, and positive vibes, and all of our sincere best wishes to these families for strength throughout the sentencing. I do believe that they were saved a lot of anguish, a lot of mental anguish by not having a trial. But I also feel like I wanted to see all of the evidence. And it's not about us. It's not about our wants or needs. It's about what the families feel. And I stand with them. I'm right there with them, for the families who feel that this is okay for the plea and for the families who feel that it shouldn't have been.